Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of My Dog Will Eat My Face. Now, on this podcast, I'm going to touch on a rather taboo topic, one that they say you should never bring up in polite company. Well, I'm certainly not that much of a polite person, so I think I'm definitely at liberty to bring it up. And no, I'm not talking about something such as politics, thankfully, so you don't have to smash the end button or pause button that quickly right now. I'm in fact talking about money, finances, if you will. Because when you're disabled, and certainly when you're facing a long and slow decline into the sunset as I am facing, to not discuss money would leave a rather ugly void in the totality of my discussion with respect to what it's like to be disabled and to be slowly dying. Because alas, the sad truth is that while I face all these health issues, while I face things such as severe nerve pain, such as edema in my extremities and swelling, which is also extremely painful, such as shortness of breath, where I require 16 whopping liters of oxygen full time to be able to breathe at a normal level. When all these things are tearing you down, lingering still behind that is the unmistakable fact that when I'm still alive, I'm still on this planet Earth, and therefore I still have to make time for handling money in this very dark time of my life. When many people would say money should not be my concern. It should be the least of my concerns. And in the grand scheme of things, that's true. I don't think I'm going to pass in my final moments and think to myself, gosh, I really wish I spent more time worrying about money. I don't think I'm going to do that. And I don't think anyone ever has done that. And most likely, no one ever will think, in hindsight, that they had misspent more time trying to tackle financial issues in the end of their days. But as it is, we live on the planet Earth, a planet that they say is made to go around by money. If you're in the United States of America, such as me, you're in a very capitalist country where money is absolutely a concern and a requirement in in every step of your life, regardless of disease, regardless of danger, regardless of what you might be personally going through, you're faced with a horrible, lingering issue of dealing with your finances. Especially dealing with them while you are in no position to actually produce any work and support yourself. So I'm going to try to touch on that topic today. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. I'm sure it's something that, again, most people don't bring up to maintain polite company. Well, I'm not a polite person. I don't have to be polite. And I'm going to go ahead and approach that topic and see where it takes us. I'm sure it's no surprise to any of my listeners that as I face my grueling descent into the sunset, that I am in no condition to really be able to work anymore. Now, this has been a disease I've had truly my whole life, and thankfully I managed to fight through it and keep it pretty much under the wraps, so to speak, for a large duration of my life, and in that time was able to work. And for that, I'm actually very thankful that I was able to spend some time to at least learn or earn, I should say, an income. Excuse me. Got a little tongue-tied there. Almost said something totally different. Never mind. Got a little tongue-tied. But I was able to earn an income, and I'm very grateful for that. However, of course, now it's the complete antithesis. I'm in a situation where there's no way I could conceivably work when I can faint and pass out randomly. My cognition is declining quite a bit, and I'm certainly not able to travel or go to the office to work. Of course, there's lots of work at home opportunities out there, but let's be honest, for the most part, work at home opportunities also mean you have to fly out to the home base at some point or another to meet your team. And there's business trips, you know, that's how these things work. Work at home, quote unquote, works. I can't travel at all on an airplane anymore. I'm told by my doctors it would kill me. So just that right there, who would hire me, never even seen my face? It's possible that someone would. But eventually, probably, they'd say, hey, good news, we're going to do a team meetup. We want you to fly out here to insert a city name here. And I wouldn't be able to do that. So there's all kinds of things in my way from being able to earn an income at this point in my life. And it comes at a time when I'm hounded with incredible health issues that just keep coming and coming and get worse and worse. And I find it extremely difficult to just keep myself above water, because the lifestyle that I was once used to is now flat out no longer available to me without the appropriate income. And to be honest, I don't have a lot of room to complain at face value, because I do have a lot of long-term disability benefits, yet it's actually in a process of renewal, so knock on wood that gets renewed without an issue. And I'm lucky that I've been able to maintain some income. Of course, I've applied for disability with the Social Security Administration. And there's a running saying in the United States that the Social Security Administration, gosh, I can't speak. I'm just going to call it the SSA. When the SSA first gets your application for disability benefits, they decline everybody, is what I've been told flat out. They declined at least 99% of first-time applicants, and you absolutely need an attorney to get your benefits. I literally had people screaming at me, my father, saying, "You need to get a lawyer. You will never get the benefits you need if you do not get a lawyer." And I said, well, let me just see what I can get doing it myself. And I did it online, sat at my computer at home and applied. And there's a 6-month waiting period that they have before they look at your case, because they want to make sure you're truly disabled, that in 4 months you're suddenly just totally fine. So they want to prevent that sort of thing. So there's a 6-month waiting period before they even look at your application. That 6-month marker hit, and I was immediately approved. So my experience is not common. It's not what most people told me to expect, that's for sure. I wasn't immediately denied, I was immediately approved. It was very easy for me. I just filled out the paperwork online at home, and bam, there it was. I was approved for it. That doesn't mean everyone else's experience is going to be the same. But mine was quite, I don't want to say lucky, because I think the reason why I was approved is it was so glaringly obvious that I was disabled based on the facts surrounding my health that they couldn't do anything but approve me. It's such a weird paradox. It's good luck in that I was approved right away, but I was approved right away because I'm in such dire health. And that's not good luck. So, I don't know. I don't know what that is. So if you're like me, you might get approved right away. Or you might be like the majority, you have to fight tooth and nail for your approval. No, either way, no matter how you come around to get it, it's most certainly going to be less money than you've ever made throughout the majority of your life. You're going to have to learn to live on a substantially lower income. And I've been snared for a long time in a trap of golden handcuffs, where because of my income at the time, I was able to live somewhat well. And when I got so sick and when I couldn't work and when I wasn't making the amount of money I was making, I was suddenly facing dire financial issues. Not because of lack of approval from the government or anything like that. I didn't have a fight with that. My biggest issue was myself and the decisions I made prior to getting just so sick. So let me explain to the world exactly how I really snared myself in a terrible trap before I got really sick. Just a few months beforehand, I actually went through probably one of the worst periods, one of the most expensive periods of my life, where I went through a very difficult divorce. And as a result of that, I lost my home. We had to sell our home, essentially, our joint home. And needed to find a new place to work. So I looked for a decent apartment near my workplace. Because I figured, well, if I have to choose, it'd be close to the office. And so I chose a quote-unquote luxury apartment building when there's nothing about it that makes it luxury. It's just a building. I guess, I don't know, the carpeting isn't all torn up. I don't know what makes it quote-unquote luxury. I mean, I guess I don't get it. But anyway, it's a decent apartment building. Maybe it's the fact that obviously it's got central air. I have a washer and dryer in my apartment. I've got a beautiful kitchen with granite countertops and a bar. Nice balcony and patio that looks out towards the city. My view is literally just the buildings, skyscrapers. That's all I can see from my home. But, you know, on the inside, it's just white walls and a floor, you know. I guess, yeah, it's got a Pergo, fake hardwood floor throughout most of it and carpet in the bedrooms. But honestly, it's pretty typical for an apartment. I don't, apart from, I guess, the nice kitchen, I don't know what makes it luxury, quote unquote. Kind of I think it's just a term they use to snare people. Anyway, so I moved into there, and the rent, I'm not going to be afraid to tell you, is pretty darn high. The area where I live, all rent is really high right now. And where I live, it's still higher than the average. It's about $200 a month more than the average in the city in which I live. So that's a lot. That's a lot of money. When I was working, it wasn't, because I was making substantially more money when I was working. Now, when I became sick and was on Social Security, I no longer had that kind of income. But I was also now stuck in a lease. And what's worse is, I couldn't and cannot imagine for the life of me actually successfully moving to another apartment. Because I am just so incredibly weak and so tired. And just picking up some books and putting them away for me would just be exhausting at this point. Yes, I get a moving company. I've gotten moving companies in the past before. They don't unpack everything for you. They don't hang everything for you. They don't put everything away. They put the boxes in your house. They move the furniture where you want it. And they ask you for, at least where I live, a couple $1,000 and say adios. It's very simple. From there, it's all up to you. And I don't have that physical ability to move. Moreover, I don't have the physical ability to go and shop for apartments and buy one. I'd have to get in a new apartment completely unseen. Completely unseen, because I can't leave my house without oxygen. And if I do bring an oxygen tank, it lasts only 23 minutes. Good luck running around town trying to find an apartment with that. It is impossible. So, I've been trapped ever since. I'm still there. I'm still in that apartment. When my lease came up for a renewal, when I could have said, hey, here's a chance to move to someplace cheaper, the idea of moving was just so unimaginable to me. It was just such a terrifying thought. And a process that I wouldn't even know how to do it. I wouldn't even know how to find an apartment. So I just renewed that expensive lease, even though I'm just on a pittance of an income. So I've been kind of stuck in this quote-unquote luxury apartment near my former place of work that I don't ever need to even see again. That's the great irony, is that now I can see my former office building from my balcony, and yet I don't work there anymore. Or anywhere. So I really trapped myself and snared myself into a lousy home situation. And more than that, I also snared myself into a terrible vehicle situation. My prior vehicle was a lease, which was the dumbest mistake of my entire life. I'll never lease another vehicle forever. That's my advice anyway. I don't lease a vehicle. It's stupid. Because you pay the lease, 5 years go by, And then now you either get a new car or then if you like your vehicle, you can then at that point try to buy it for another 5-year plan or 4 years. So now you're looking at 9 or 10 years to buy a vehicle, but you should normally do it in no more than 5, in my opinion. 10 years with one vehicle that you're paying off for 10 years, that's not worth it, man. So the lease on my vehicle, which was a very expensive vehicle, came up right when I was going through the divorce, right before my health crashed. So I decided to buy a car rather than lease, and I got a fairly nice BMW 3 Series. Again, this is when I was working. Not a big deal. Had a car payment, nothing in the world. I knew at least at the end of 4 years, it's my vehicle. But then I couldn't work, and then I was on that lower income. And so I was completely entrapped in this quote-unquote luxury apartment building with high rent and paying a ton of money for a BMW that eventually I couldn't even drive because I was passing out randomly. And the thought of me passing out behind the wheel scared the hell out of me. It scared me to death, no pun intended. What if I passed out behind the vehicle and hit someone? What if I hit a dog? What if I hit a child? Things like that just give me the willies. I can't be responsible for that. So I electively stopped using my vehicle. I just sat in the garage in my apartment building. And, I'm sorry, in my luxury apartment building. And I was still paying car payments on a car now that I was not able to use because I didn't want to faint when driving it. So it was just ridiculous. I was just totally ensnared in all these agreements that I couldn't get out of. I can't walk out of my lease. That would be astronomically expensive. I can't even fathom physically moving. I also had a car I didn't ever drive because I was terrified that I would faint when driving it and do something. Yet I was still paying for it. It was just a nightmare. It was a terrible nightmare. And not long after that, then, of course, my work benefits disintegrated, my life insurance benefits, my health care benefits, all that disintegrated on top of that. And I was on my own to figure that out. So I had all that going on. These terrible financial ideas at a time when my health was deteriorating dramatically. Still is. And even though I would maybe be lying there in a hospital bed, moments away from buying a ventilator, so to speak, I'd be worried about a car payment. It's not really the priorities you should have when you're in your last days of your life. I do believe that. So, what did I do? So what did I do? Well, for one, I reached out to a friend of mine who is very well connected in the auto industry, especially with respect to used vehicles and restorations. And he actually helped me to sell the car. Now, I didn't want to turn the car in for a voluntary repossession because a repossession is still a repossession on your credit file, no matter what it might be. And at this point, I was still trying to save my credit as much as I could. So, he successfully did sell it to me, to someone from out of state who drove in and picked it up and drove it back home. And that worked out. That got me out of a fairly hefty car payment. So, bravo, that was excellent. A friend of mine really helped me out with that. And then it's kind of funny. I applied for disability and got it through SSA years ago for the first time. I mean, easily over a decade ago. Because I was having trouble between jobs. I wasn't sure if I was going to find work, so I applied for disability and got it. But then I got a job opportunity that I felt I could do, so I returned to work. And then I paid any disability money earned after I began working back to the government. It was really a golden story of a safety net and it being used to help you get through those times, to rebound and become a contributing member to society. It was a beautiful, story for the classic safety net. I mean, I was able to get better and return to work and pay back those monies that the government paid to me while I was working, and everyone was happy. The government was happy. I was happy. The IRS was happy. Everyone was happy. So this happened actually years and years and years ago. So long ago, I've not even mentioned it throughout this podcast. But anyway, it did happen. But during all that time, I was accruing, quote-unquote, seniority under Social Security. So what's silly is when I was working, I suddenly became qualified for Medicare. You have to be in disability for a year to qualify. And so I qualified for Medicare when I didn't even need it. So I never paid for it and never used it, and yet I qualified for it. So as soon as I reapplied for Social Security and got it, now in my current state, I immediately had Medicare and also immediately qualified for Medicare Part D. So with respect to health insurance, I really didn't have anything to worry about. What's more is I even used a government program unique to my state, a little-known program, to pay for all of my health care needs. The state pays for every last bit. I don't even know how I found out about them. I've never heard of them before. When I mention it to somebody else, they just give me, a blank deer's eye look. It's a very little-known program in my state. And I swear, when I call there's like 4 people working in this office. And I picture them in some dingy office in the basement of the Capitol building. It was like some governor's pet project in the 80s or something, or 90s. And it's sat there ever since, and no one's heard of it. But anyway, I qualified for that. Because it wasn't based on income or anything like that. It based on what you had and what your needs were, your medical needs were. And what they do is they pay for my Medicare D plan, the premiums, all my insurance, all my costs, all my prescriptions, everything. All that is zeroed out. I don't pay a nickel. I'm not paid throughout this whole demise a penny, literally, for any medical care whatsoever. And that's pretty good bragging rights. And I really capitalized upon that based on the fact that I was just too sick and I qualified for these programs. So that's one way in that I survived this terrible predicament. In addition to selling the car, obviously. I was sad to see that car go, but I wasn't even using it. Gosh, it was a no-brainer. I had to get rid of it and get rid of that car payment. And I've worked with my social worker extensively in hospice to find other programs where I can reduce costs, other things where I might be qualified for, wherein I could help to control my expenses. In fact, one large expense we identified when we were looking at my spending habits was food. I'd order in delivery for every single meal, so it was just ridiculous how much money I was spending on food. So she got me involved in a program where more or less taught you to cook at home on your own dime. There's a lot of companies out there that do this where they deliver food ingredients to you and instructions. They kind of teach you how to cook. So I got one of those, and then I became in love with cooking. Now I have a new hobby. I cut down my food expenses. And it also gave me something fun to do during the days and evenings in my home to, sit there in the kitchen and whip up stuff together and make terrible mistakes, try to figure out how to fix it. and so I've had actually a really good time with that. And so that was a double benefit. I cut down on my food expenses, and on top of that, I developed a new hobby. So that was awesome. That's another way I adapted. The biggest expense, though, is that stupid lease. And I just don't see me getting out from underneath it in my physical state. I don't know how I would move. Because unfortunately, despite everything I've done to reduce my expenses, I am still on a month-to-month deficit. Oh, what's more as well is, unfortunately, because all this happened also on the heels of a divorce, as I said. So I had astronomical credit card debt because I used that, unfortunately, to pay the attorneys. That's all I had to pay the attorneys. And so I also had to declare bankruptcy in my physical state. Something no one wants to do. Obviously, this was after the car incident because it's funny, I was so worried about a voluntary repossession on my record. When flash forward 6 months, I was declaring bankruptcy. I saw no way around it. But it did give me a new chance at living. It got rid of that credit card debt. And that's all I wanted. But yeah, I had to hit rock bottom financially and declare bankruptcy to really start up anew, clean, and without that crushing credit card debt. So I did some pretty dramatic things to cut my costs. And I am still to this day at a month-to-month deficit, a mild one, like $100 a month. But when you're dealing with such little money as you come to on Social Security, that's a good amount of money. That's been really hard. And it's so incredibly bizarre in hindsight. And I don't know what you call it, in current sight. As I look at how things are today, it is bizarre to me that my biggest worries that keep me up at night are nothing existential. There's nothing worried about the pain in my leg or my disease getting worse and killing me. It's still finances. It's still dealing with money. When my attention should clearly be elsewhere. It's only starting to hit me now how truthful that is. My attention should really be elsewhere. I think the underscoring message of this podcast so far is that if you're in any position similar to mine, you have to be really creative and thoughtful in ways you can save money and cut the fat off of your expenditures, especially with things you no longer need. But as I consider it now, looking back, perhaps just within the last year, I only actually need to look at the last week. I see how much of my attention has been spent on material things, on money, on budgeting, on finances. When I may very well lay down tonight, and it would be my last. I might not ever wake up. That is a risk I run every night. So as I look back, I really don't like that my final days were spent in a quagmire of worry over money. It's so unfortunate that I live in a society to where there's no escaping that. And no matter state that you're in, you still have to deal with the money. But to worry about it is different than taking prudent action to mitigate the problem. Taking prudent action is fine, but worrying about it when it could be the last thing I worry about seems entirely foolish and missing the bar of what I should be thinking about in these final moments of my life. If I'm conscious and it comes to it, to where I know I'm in the last throes of my life and I have moments to live, I know I'm not going to think, golly, I'm sure glad I spent all that time worrying about money. So I think taking appropriate action and being creative was how to take that action, do the research, be a little savvy. That's prudent. That makes sense. But to worry about it, that's a different animal. That's as useful as chewing gum to solve a math problem. It does nothing. And I certainly don't want my last thoughts on this earth to be mired in fiscal worry. It's only going to get worse come tax time. There's a Sumerian proverb that said, you can have a king or you can have a lord, but the man to fear is the tax collector. Boy, is that true. I am dreading how my taxes are going to be this year. I know I'm most certainly going to owe money. And there's no money I can give back. There just isn't. It's gone. It's spent. So, I highly recommend to myself and to others to not worry about the fiscal stuff if you're faced in a situation like mine. Being constructive and making prudent changes, that makes sense. No problem with that. Well, laying awake and worrying about it at night when it could be your last is just, to me, deplorable. I don't want that to be the last thing on my mind. So I have to change that. Because right now it very well could be my last thought on this earth. Worrying about finances. I've done many prudent steps. And there's some more I can do as well to trim off the fat that I'm aware of. And that's fine. But struggling internally over money in my last days, to me, it sounds almost embarrassing. I really don't want that to be my last moments, and the only way to assure that is that I don't worry about it. I can think about it. I can make plans. I can change things. But in no sense is made by worrying about it. So that's something in me that I have to change. 8 o'clock yesterday morning. Because it would be appalling to me if something as remedial as arithmetic. And things like the cable bill become my last mortal thoughts. I don't know when I'm going to die like everyone else. So I am just going to have to do my very best to not worry. If things fall apart a little bit, they fall apart. It's still not the biggest thing I'm facing. It's sort of like the clown distracting me on one side, while on the other side someone's pickpocketing me. I don't want to fall for that. I don't want my last thoughts to be worried about the cable bill or something else remedial. I just don't. I'd much rather have those last moments be cuddling my dog. Things I'm most thankful for. How much I love someone. How lucky I am to have the things I have. There is any number of things above worrying that are better suited, which makes worrying now, especially now for me in my life, totally appallable. So I just have to avoid that. As best as I can. So, I'm going to bring this week's podcast to a wrap on that note. Mainly because I don't want to sit here and think about finances any longer. After I do a long stretch analysis of it, it's incredible how boring it is. Yet another reason why I don't want it to be my final thoughts. Because they're just so incredibly boring. But with that, just talking through it, and this podcast has taught me really that at the end of the day, finances, although necessary, are still relatively petty to the bigger picture. And I don't want to spend undue amounts of my time, which frankly at this point is any more time than necessary, worrying or thinking about money that I absolutely have to. Because I can spend that time more wisely thinking about almost anything else. I could be cuddling my dog. I could be reading a good book. I could be studying an old map. I could be watching a documentary. I could be watching a stupid TV show. I could be talking to a good friend of mine. I could be eating some delicious food. There's a myriad of things that rank higher than worrying about money. So I will absolutely try to be wise about it so I don't end up homeless or something. But I'm not going to give it any more attention than is necessary. That's what I've just learned for myself in doing this week's podcast. So really, I have to thank you, the dear listener, for sitting with me through this. This was a thought process for me that I didn't know where it would take me, and I didn't know what my conclusion would be. But it took me to a conclusion that makes sense for me. And it gives me a much better alternative for whatever may be my final moments, even my final month or year on this earth, than it would otherwise be expended on silly worry. As a wise man once said, don't pet the little stuff, and don't sweat the big stuff, or something bizarre. I don't remember what that was now. Anyway, that came out wrong. Scratch that. I'll edit that out at the end. Yeah, I'll do that. Make sure no one hears that. Anyway, so with that, I give to you, the listener, my sincere thanks for listening to me as I talked through that process and came to my conclusion. You know, truly, when I start these podcasts, I do not know where they're going to end up. I leave my thought process wide open and just talk through it. And I am happy where today's podcast led me on that terrible, taboo topic of money. So thank you so much. And please be sure to follow the podcast and turn on notifications so you're notified of future podcasts. But if you really want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/mydogwilleeatmyface. And with that, I must just say, ciao for now.